Hello, my fellow readers. This is iDarkSymphony777 with another fanfiction review. As always, a link to the story will be in the description below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, click on that bell for notifications, leave a comment in the comment section below on your thoughts of the story. And finally, this is my opinion. My opinion is not indicative of everyone in the world, so please respect that. So, the story I am doing a review of is Fangs for the Memories by Wild Wind Vampire. It is a Scooby-Doo fanfiction, and I admit, reading through this story, I was massively disappointed. I do think there is some good in this story, but this story just reeks of missed potential. What I would honestly bluntly say about the story. So, let's go into the plot. So, this story is not really formatted like a traditional story. Instead, this story is very much traditionally formatted in the style of a teen sitcom. It's the author very obviously takes some cues from teen sitcoms. I'm guessing like the mid to late 2000s. I guess the chief inspiration would probably be Victorious, if I had to guess. Uh, and so that kind of leads into the direction of how the story goes, how the characters go, how everything is formatted, from the general plot all the way to like even the minute writing style is all dictated on trying to emulate that uh sitcom style. As for the plot, this story is basically a spinoff of Scooby-Doo and the Ghoul School. So, for those who don't know what that is, Scooby-Doo and the Girl School was I believe it was a 1980s era movie. I'm guessing, I'm trying to remember the year. I think it was 1986. It's really just a guess. Where Scooby-Doo, Shaggy Rogers, and Scrappy-Doo, they are hired by this woman named Miss Grimwood to teach gym at the Grimwood School for Girl Ghouls, and they run into the Grimwood Girls, which are Sabella Dracula, Elsa Frankenstein, Phantasma, Winnie, and Tanis. And the Grimwood Girls became something of a group of very popular figures. And people have been wanting for years to have them appear in another uh, Scooby-Doo cartoon or media or anything like that. They did appear in OKKO. I've heard that they actually did appear there, and it was like a big deal. I think that's like the only reason why people even remember that show is just that one episode. I don't think they remember it for the OKKO. Uh, so with this story, this takes place kind of almost immediately after the events of the movie, probably like a semester. And the story follows Sabella, specifically Sabella Dracula, journeying through growing up and finishing up Grimwood School with the rest of her friends, and basically the trials and tribulation of that. There's not much depth in the story. It's very much what you see is what you get, sort of deal. So, and these types of stories can work well. Some more simple plots can work well. This is a very simple plot that is, from a plot standpoint, it's very average. There's not with a premise basically of Sabella growing up and finishing school and becoming independent. I was expecting more from the plot, and I'm gonna get into that a little bit, but it certainly feels like the author tried very, very hard to get as close as trying to emulate one for one sitcom style as possible, and that is quite frankly impossible. Sitcoms usually rely very heavily on body language and facial features, as well as more humorous situations to deal with. Basically, not only what everyone said, what people say in the show, but how they say it, how they move their body, how they show their emotion on their face. Sitcoms are visually adept. Not to say they can't work in other mediums. There is a specific part of the story that proves it can work in a written medium. It just sitcoms are just very, very favorable towards a visual style, which is why they're so successful on TV and why they still exist, more or less. I don't know if they died out or not because of like all the streaming and stuff. I really don't. But I do think it's very basic, and there's just really not much to go about. I will say this in terms of the plot. This line right here, this refers to Revolta, the main antagonist, who is the main villain of Scooby-Doo and the Girls' School. She does show up, but she's pretty much just a non-factor in like past, past chapter 18, and this is a 50 chapter story. What? She's like gone by like 2/5 of the book story, and that's kind of bad, really disappointing, all things considered. But yeah, that's really all I can say about the plot because there's just not much to go into it. With the characters, however, there is a lot to talk about. First off, I think Sabella was fine. She wasn't great, but I wouldn't say she was bad either. She's very much very much a stereotypical college girl, like a very like I guess you could say like the person who was the main character, Victorious, or Carly Shay. In terms of character, she's very much just run of the mill, just acts like a normal girl. She gets up in a situation, she realizes the error for she kind of learns and grows and experiences situations as they go along, and she grows. There's not too much depth to her, but there is at least enough depth that you can at least understand the basis of her character, and that's fine. Like she's very with this type of story, it makes sense to go with a more basic protagonist. And I think Sabella from that role is done well enough that I don't really have any big complaints about her. Aside from the consistency, again, that's more of an issue with the formatting and trying to make the stories very sitcom-y style. There's going to be a lot of inconsistencies with the story. There's going to be a lot of inconsistencies with with a lot of things in the story. We'll get to that. However, once you move past Sabella, you get to Tanis, Winnie, Elsa, and Phantasma. That's where the story kind of drops off in quality. These four characters, they're barely a factor in the story. Tanis is kind of a gray area because there is a large part of the story that a large portion of the episodes that do focus on Sabella's relationship specifically with Tanis. So she's kind of a more major supporting, like a secondary character sort of deal. So I don't really have too much to say about Tanis. She's very much similar to Tanis in Gold School. She's very shy. She's very reserved, but she really wants to be there for her friends. Again, just like Sabella, it's fine. Her character is fine for what her role is, but there's not. It's just very shallow in how it's done. Past those two, Winnie, Phantasma, and Elsa, they're kind of they get the short end of the stick. They barely have any characters. They barely develop in any way past what you actually see in Ghoul School. Like they don't develop, and that's kind of something that the author actually points out in this author note, like right here. I think there's something to be said about all the characters should be three-dimensional, have their own unique personalities. I like to stay true to the original characters while also slightly building on them, which is something which on one hand fits sitcom, but on the other hand, it tends to screw over characters when you want to do something if you're trying to keep them static. And I'm only bringing this up specifically with these three because at least the author tries to do something with Sabella and Tannis. It's very minimal, but at least you can say there was an attempt. With Elsa, Phantasma, and Winnie, there's no attempt to really flesh out their characters in any way. They are just blank slates, more or less, that doesn't really develop past what you see in the movie. And if you ever see the movie and you see those three characters, you don't change from that. There is a plethora of original characters. The two most important are a witch named Sydney, who I honestly think is not a bad character. I think she brings a lot of chemistry with Sydney in this sort of format. Basically, Sabella acts like the straight man too. Sydney's more kooky and crazy dynamics. Basically, I guess you could say kind of acting like a softcore version of Carly and Sam from iCarly sort of deal, where Sydney's like the more irresponsible personality, but still has that slight. I'll take things seriously when needed sort of deal. And I think that's fine. Again, just like with Sabella and Tannis, it's fine for what the role is, but doesn't really go too much into depth. And then the other important OC is a character by the name of Coach Mikuchi. Now, I want to bring this specific problem with a lot of the characters up, specifically because it in relation to the coach. The author, I don't know if it's intentional or not, but the author writing the male characters in the story comes off as a bit sexist. What I mean is, all the male characters, every single male character, is either a jackass or an idiot. And those are the ones with actual personalities. The ones that don't have that, they're just literally cardboard. They just say one line or two and then just disappear. There is no depth to any of these characters. There is nothing really changed about their character. And basically, this kind of goes into the format of the writing. Every time when Sabella enters the class, the teacher shows up, says something, then the typical male character, and it always seems to be a male, either says something incredibly stupid or acts like a complete jackass, and basically just for sole purpose of just writing a cringy joke that ends with them failing. Like even at the end of the story, Sabella's taking classes and basically reveals like some of the people, surprisingly they're all male, repeats like every single class like 8 times. Like that is just really weird and comes off very awkward when there's like no character. Even the sole attempt of trying to flesh out a single male character, which is Phantasma's boyfriend for a time, Isaiah, he just randomly turns misogyn homophobic for no fucking reason. Just randomly homophobic with like none of the characters can be anything more than rude jackasses or incomprehensible idiots. No amount, like at no point at any point in the story did any character, male character, branch out with that. Which bring me to Coach Mikuchi. So he's basically kind of the joke character. So basically he's basically the stereotypical goofy mascotty type of character who basically just has a bunch of goofy stuff and just acts like an idiot. Which are common in sitcoms. Like with iCarly, we have Gibby. Coach Mikuchi is basically the Gibby of the story. He's basically goofy. He is an idiot. However, there is a in-story reason why he's there. Basically, he acts like really inappropriate and weird. And when they ask Miss Grimwood, like, why did you bring this idiot here? It's like, no, I specifically hired him because he was an idiot, because I want you to learn to think independently. And I thought, okay, that's at least something. It's something to his character. And as the story goes on, you actually see there is more depth to him as a character. He basically, every year when they do the the volleyball tournament, he basically half of his lines are basically just um, uh, throwing out advertisements, like pretend advertisements, just try and see if he can get money for the school. Later in the story, he basically asks Sabella if he can be a teacher's assistant. He actually does show that he actually, despite being an idiot, he actually cares about the students. He actually wants them to learn something, but he's just inept. So there is a surprisingly lot of, not a lot of depth, but enough depth that you can tell that, just like with Tanis and Sabella when it comes to the character development, there was an attempt to do something with Coach Mikuchi. There is something to him, and honestly, he's kind of in. I kind of like him. He's like a really ridiculously campy character, but he has a charm to him, sort of. Especially since like half the stuff he's eating, despite being the gym teacher, he's like half the time he's eating or he's playing like Harry Potter games, and that's fine. But yeah, that's really it with the characters. There's just there every other character besides Mikuchi, Sydney, Sabella, and even to a smaller extent Tanis are just very shallow. They're very one dimensional. There's just nothing to talk about with them. Grammar wise, honestly, I have nothing wrong with the grammar. I think that's fine. Sentence structure is very, very weird. In essence, in trying to keep that sitcom vibe going, the author did have to specifically do the sentence structure and the writing, and i.e. the prose, in a way to kind of give off that sitcom vibe. And this is where trying to go for a one for one style really bit this story in the tongue by trying to one for one the style to that degree. It makes the prose a lot weaker because now everything skips ahead, it skips around. This actually causes inconsistencies in the story. The prose is very weak, and there's just nothing. It's just a lot of the story becomes skippable because so much stuff kind of gets in the way. Like with the formatting, with the pure form. If you look at it from a pure formatting standpoint, the entire story, every single chapter except for like one or like two or three chapters, follows the exact same format. It goes journal exchange. Sabella wakes up. Sabella goes downstairs, meets her friends, gets in this chapter specifically gets a schedule for the school, goes to the first class. We introduce to the problem of that specific chapter. Goes to the second class. We see that class. Then afterward, then the day ends. Sabella hangs out with her friends at dinner, and then she wakes up. Second journal. Let's see if it is it here. Yeah, second journal. She wakes up, goes to uh goes to wakes up, eats, goes to first class. Usually one of these two classes has some answer to whatever specific problem is in this that Sabella's dealing with in that story. Goes to second class, the problem is solved. She hangs out with her friends at dinner. Everything's solved, and she goes to sleep. And it repeats. So it starts getting very exhausting mentally when there's no deviation in the story. There is zero deviation from the majorities. There are a couple exceptions, but they are very much in the minority. Like when Revolta takes over Grimwood's Girl and they have to run away. That's a different chapter 48 where the chapter is told from different characters' point of views. That's different. but those are very, very fast in the minority. Like I said, it's like 2 or 3 chapters that it changed up the formula anyway. And it's stuff like that that causes the story to kind of fall apart once you move past the sick once you realize it's the writing's based off sitcom and you move past that, you realize how horribly formatted this story is because it's trying so hard to fit itself in a way that the author wants it to do and is not compromising on the beliefs to basically try and balance out the sitcom style with more prose heavy. And the same thing goes with the pacing. This story is very fast paced, which kind of fits sitcoms because you have to sitcoms are usually very non sequitur in their episodes, so you can literally watch for the most part any episode of a season in any order. But that comes at the cost of pacing issues and more importantly inconsistency issues. And I'm actually gonna use the what I think is the biggest example of inconsistency in this story. So we're gonna go all the way down here. It should be right here. I believe it should be this chapter. No, I don't think it's this chapter. It's one of these chapters. It's somewhere. It's one of these chapters. No. I think it's this one. I'm trying to remember. Let's see. I can't remember. Where is I honestly can't remember what specific chapter this story this let's see. Oh, right here. Chapter 47. No. Yeah. No. No, is it this one? Um Oh yeah, right here. Chapter 46. So, for context, this is the start of the final semester of the school. And right now, it's at the part where all the girls are meet up. So it's the Grimwood girls plus Sydney the witch. Sydney decides to wants to hang out with Winnie alone, and that's fine. And they kind of question it. Like all the other girls want to hang out. It's like no, I want to be with Winnie alone. Alone. It's like Sydney, are you? Yeah. Yes. Like uh uh yeah. Well, Winnie, remember what we talked about in the car? I think that might be what Sydney wants here. It's like, wait a minute, you mean I'm basically revealing out of nowhere at the end of the story with no build up, with no hints or speculation or anything. It's just Sydney's gay. Huh? And you're thinking, wait, that doesn't make any sense. But no, it gets better. Sabella actually is curious because she didn't hear any. Because Sydney reveals like I dropped hints in other classes, and then Sabella's like, "Wait a minute, you didn't drop any hints in the classes you and me were in," and it's like that's actually true. Basically, Sydney barely talks and didn't really hint anything. You think that instead of pointing out that she's kind of worried that Sabella might accidentally blab, Sydney randomly breaks the fourth wall. Like you can actually yeah, like this before all the classes in. Yeah. So instead of, doing a logical reason why she didn't tell Sabella, Sydney breaks the fourth wall and basically says, yeah, it wasn't important to the plot line. Oops. I am sorry. No, that's you can't even defend that. That's just shit writing. Like if there was an actual reason, or better yet, if the story had chapters or parts of the story focused specifically on other Grimwood girls, fine, I can get behind that. But don't randomly break the fourth wall by just revealing that all the hints I had were not classes. The character was that the main character was not in because the main character wasn't in them. That is shit writing. There is no way to defend something like this. And also, this is the fact that it's just also it kind of is stereotyping because it's specifically Winnie. Like Sydney and Sabella aren't really kind of work well together, and you pick the tomboy. Also, surprisingly, Phantasma breaks up with her boyfriend. Elsa dates someone, breaks up with him, but also the lesbian couple doesn't really do anything. Yes, that is something else. I don't want to complain about that because it's if the author wants to make the only lesbian couple and the lesbian happens to be the tomboy of the group, you go ahead. But what else I can't defend when it comes to the inconsistencies is also not even the inconsistencies. The pacing is also the very preachy tone the author uses when using certain topics. So the story is very, very heavy on environmental safety, and it's fine. If if you want to like protect the environment and plant trees and all that stuff, that's fine. But the problem is, don't be preachy about it because once you start being preachy about anything, whether it be environmental safety or political issues, anything really, even video games, you risk literally alienating and criticizing the people who are reading your product. So, like for instance, to use a popular example, Just Stop Oil in Europe. Their whole stick is they want to stop. They want cars to run on electric. They want to stop. They want to stop car gas consumption. That's fine. That's fine. What do they do? They usually park themselves in front of large traffic, large intersectional traffic, jamming up all the cars and causing what's called gridlock. For those of you who don't know, gridlock is basically a term used to describe a bunch of cars that are in stationary in one place. Because, fun fact, cars tend to burn more gas and oil when they're not moving. So, in essence, by all these protesters being environmental activists and sitting themselves in front of cars, they're basically shooting themselves in the foot because they're causing more gas and oil to be used by their own actions, which is causing a lot of people to claim they're hypocrites. Like they're not actually going through and backing up their own beliefs because it's like more likely they're probably all driving cars. Second off, they're basically their actions are actually causing more oil to be used because car burns through less oil while it's in motion. And also, I bet you if you ask any of them, it's like, oh, you want to play a treat? It's like, nah, I got too busy annoying everyone else. It basically ruins the message you're trying to give because you're preaching. Nobody likes when people preach, and that's the same thing in stories. People are able to instinctively tell if they're being preached to in stories, and at parts of the story, it very much felt like I was being preached to with an environmental message. Again, if the author believes in this stuff, then that's fine. I'm not going to criticize the author for believing in something that he or she believes in. But don't force the issue into the story, which is what happened. Which is what happens throughout this story when it comes to protecting the environment. The author very blatantly forces the issue into the story for the sake of trying to keep up a plot or give some kind of context. And that will honestly backfire because instead of agreeing with the person, they'll just say, no, I'm going to do the opposite because you're preaching to me. And I don't like that. And that honestly is a shame with this story from that side, because I don't know. I don't know. I wouldn't hate it as much. Granted, I still hate it, but I wouldn't hate it as much if not for the preachy, because at the end of the day, that's only accounts for like a third of the story, the whole environmental thing. No, not a third of the story, a fourth of the story. My bad. Would I recommend this story? I can't. I can't. There is so much wrong with it. I will give the author credit where credit is due. It is a creative story. I do have to admit that writing a story like a sitcom is a creative idea. This is actually something I never seen before, you know. And so I think, credit where credit is due to the author trying something new and unique. It just really didn't work out. Do I have a favorite part of the story? Yes, actually. Chapter 48. This chapter basically proved to me that this idea, this concept of a sitcom style fan fiction can actually work, but the author just so botched up the execution it wasn't even funny. So what this chapter is, it's basically the course of a single day, but instead of focusing exclusively on Sabella, it focuses on all the Grimwood girls, plus I think Octi, Matches, Miss Grimwood, and one of the Joker characters, Eric. And guess what? This chapter actually worked. It gave breath to all the non-Sabella characters. It gave them something to do. It gave us some insight on who they are as characters and how they interact with everyone. This single chapter, proved without a shadow of a doubt the idea literally can work. It can. It just, the execution was so badly botched that it just kind of left it kind of made me not even hate the story. It just made the story so monumentally disappointing that I kind of hate it for that. What would I change? Well, honestly, we're gonna if I had to change the story, keep it in the sitcom style, but I think there should be at least a little bit of compromise to at least give some depth, to give some more prose and give more depth into the characters. Because honestly, going back here, while slightly building, that's like not the whole point of writing a story. You're supposed there if you're writing a short story, then that's fine. Not really developing anymore. But this is a 300,000 plus word story. Give some compromise to actual character development. Have them change and grow, and have them showcase some of the fun. You can still keep them largely static, and I think this story, a sitcom style thing, would kind of benefit that more. But that would be the first thing I do. Second thing I do, I would have more chapters focus more on the other girls. So instead of every chapter focusing exclusively on Sabella, have, I don't know, every a chapter or two on like every couple of chapters focus on a different girl. Like we can have a chapter focus on Winnie and how she interacts with the other characters. We can have an episode focusing on Elsa and how she's interacted. Like there's an episode of where Elsa's being bullied for being man-made. I think that specific chapter would have been better if that story focused on Elsa rather than Sabella. That honestly would have been fine. Have episodes focus on Tannis and her growing and getting slightly more confident. Have Winnie, no, not Winnie, Phantasma grow into like be the more jokey character, but also have like a little more serious edge on how she has to hold back on the jokes sometimes. There's so much you can do with the story and the setting of the story that honestly would make the entire thing well done. Next thing I would change is I would at least lessen the whole preachy tone of the environmental stuff. You can still keep the environmental stuff. That I have no problem with that. But I think more naturally integrating it into the story, like instead of like you can make have a character be more of an have a character be an environmentalist. Hell, have Tannis be an environmentalist. I don't think that Tannis becoming an environmentalist over the course of the story would be a bad idea. Or hell, even make one of the other characters be an environmentalist, like an OC that's an environmentalist, and it kind of showcases her like being like her own person. And you can even have her you can even have an episode or chapter where she kind of gets overbearing. Like you could even use the preaching thing to an advantage to kind of tell a story of what happens when you preach and how that can sometimes backfire on the message. That would actually be a creative idea. You don't see ideas like the idea of the preaching actively backfiring because of the fact you're forcing it on the others. The final thing I would do is simply have make Revolta kind of more recurring antagonist, because once she only really appears sporadically across the first 20 chapters. Once she leaves, she's gone. So what I would do is early in the story introduce the Ghoul Board, because a big part of the story is based around the fact that the Ghoul Board is inciting all this expansion into Grimwood School, thus necessitating the entire story. Introduce the Ghoul Board. Have one of the members, doesn't matter which one, be Revolta in disguise, and have all the members of the Ghoul Boards kind of interact with not only the setting, but also the characters in various ways to kind of keep up the idea that, one of these is Revolta. But also leave hints behind who it might be. Put some red herrings and all that. You can eat sitcoms can have long reaching stories. It's very rare because the whole idea behind sitcoms is they're very episodic, but it has happened. And eventually have like the big finale before them graduating. Have them fight. Have the entire school, take on Revolta. You can do something like that. And also like have Shaggy and Scooby cameo. Like honestly, the fact that they didn't show up at any point in the story for a cameo, even like at the graduation, you think, oh, like hey, let's just have them show up, wish them words like, "Good guys, oh, hey Scoob, you want a Scooby snack? Yeah." Like it's a lot of these, yeah. So I don't really have much to say about the story anymore. I just think ultimately the story is just a massive ball of disappointment. Like you could tell that the author had a lot of good ideas, and the author really wanted to make those ideas, but it was so determined to make the story fit a sitcom format that the author kept kind of screwing up in all the regards. It can be done, as shown by chapter 48. It's just so hard to rationalize in that way. So I don't really have much to say about Thanks for the Memories. That's honestly just my opinion. This has been Dark Symphony 777, and cut.